What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Case Digital. My name is Zach, and in today's video, we're tackling the question of how you can reverse a string in Python. In particular, we're going to start talking about two different ways that you can reverse a string in Python. So let's hop right in and start talking about method number one. What up, everybody? So like I mentioned, we're going over the first method of how to reverse a string in Python. Before I want to do that, I kind of want to show you what we're working with. Essentially, I've got a Python script I've written up that has two functions, and this is the main call if you're not very familiar with Python. But essentially, I have this string hello, and we're just going to do the classic hello world, and then I'm just going to print it out. So if I go through this, essentially what you'll see is it just prints out hello world. There's our original string hello world. Now we want to reverse it. Now the first method is going to be I'm going to break this down into kind of the most readable, or the easiest to read, as well as probably the most performant. And that's what method two will be, is centered around the most performant or fastest way to do this. But essentially, method one is the most readable in the sense that you're just combining join, reverse, and the text that you pass in. And why this is the most readable is because essentially you're taking this reverse class and its ability to take and reverse a string, and then you're going to join it with an empty string, which will then just create your reversed, letter. So if we run this, you'll see I get, oops, I got to actually uncomment this. There we go. If I run this, what you'll see is I get the original string, hello world, and then the reverse one, which is just hello world backwards. So that's method number one. Basically, all you need to use is this reverse function in class, and then combine that with your join, which takes join and then merges everything into one. Because essentially what happens is this gives somewhat of like an iterator. It outputs basically like an iterator or a list of things, kind of very simplistically outputs a list. And then you use this blank string to kind of combine everything back. So if you're not familiar with join, essentially what happens is you can pass in a delimiter or a token or whatever you want to call it, like into here. And like if I do a comma, what this will do is essentially put a comma behind every single, character in that string. So if we wanted just the normal string, essentially it's just going to be the reverse. It outputs basically the reverse list of that string, and then we want to join it all back together into one string to make our reverse string. So that's kind of what makes it the more, I guess, the easiest to read, because you can tell exactly what it's doing here if you're familiar with these functions. So that's method number one. That's how you can reverse a string. Very easy to read, very helpful if people need to read or help maintain your code, but that's method number one. Let's move on to method number two.
Hey, I just want to jump in real quick, say thank you so much for watching the video so far. If it's providing you value, please click that like button below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel so we can learn more about software development and programming. And well, speaking of programming, let's get right back to it.
Okay, so method number two is it's supposed to be the most performant out of the two. And essentially what method number two is doing is utilizing the capability of string slicing. So what happens is in this function in method number two, we pass in the text, this hello world that we're going to use, and then we're going to use string slicing. Now what this does is this is kind of the extended slice syntax. So essentially what this means is when you have your brackets on a list or a string, or things that can be sliced in Python, essentially what happens is this first area right here is all designated for the index of the beginning of where you want to start. And then the second part is where you want to end. And then this third part, a lot of times you won't see this. A lot of times you'll just see people just do something like this, like they'll just do the beginning and the end. But if you add on this last colon and then put in a -1, essentially what you're doing is you're saying the step that you want to take. Now, this could be 1, this could be all the way, it could be, if you go outside the length of the list, you'll get an error. But essentially, if you do a -1 for your step, that just means rather than going through the list, you just go backwards. So I guess, rather than going through the list like this, you're just going to go, hey, I'm going to go backwards and just give me the string backwards. And so and why this is more performant is because I'm not calling like I was up above. I'm not calling one function and then calling another one, and also having to deal with all the internal stuff that Python deals with. Essentially, you're just utilizing what Python is kind of built for to use that slicing method within the strings and just go backwards. So if we run this, what you'll see, so if I just do method two, so you'll see that I should just get the same thing. So boom. Well, how do I know it's the same thing? Well, let's run these two together, and I'll put a number 2 here and a number one there so we can tell. So if I run this, you see that the strings match. So there you go. Those are the two different ways that you can utilize Python functions and or string slicing to reverse a string in Python. Now, if you want to test this out, whether or not which one's more performant, you can use some timing functions and stuff like that, and maybe I'll get into another video about that later. But essentially, these are the two methods that a lot of people use that are probably the most common. And probably what you'll see is most commonly used are people, like if you were to Google this, a lot of people are just using this syntax, mostly because it's performant. And when you're familiar with Python, it's pretty self-explanatory what it's doing. But sometimes if you're starting out and you're not sure, and that's why you guys are here, and that's why I'm here to help, And I actually totally forgot about this step part, so it was a good reminder for me as well. So this is probably the most way you'll see it, but a lot of times this is another way that people are actually reversing strings in Python. So without further ado, hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks for programming with me today. And if you haven't liked this video, please give it a like. And if you haven't subscribed, well, let's subscribe. Keep on learning and let's keep on coding.